I mean, you say that steel can be made accidentally, and I'll accept your word on it because I don't know anything about steel manufacturing, but it seems to me that, let's say that formica could be made accidentally. But if you suddenly were to open up an Egyptian tomb and find artifacts and pictures and tables made out of formica, this all of a sudden becomes something that is slightly puzzling, doesn't it?
Yes, and it particularly becomes puzzling if they say that this formica can only be made in an absolute vacuum at a pressure of 10 gravities.
I don't
that
care
cannot
about
be determined. Therefore, it is
how
ridiculous.
it can be made.
We can make formica. Excuse me, we can make formica today.
Look.
But if we had not made it today, we might presume that the only way we could make it would be in just such a peculiar set of circumstances as you have now stated.
As usual, Ivan, this is all going completely off the track. My original statement is that when some of the evidence presented in a paper, which is intrinsically somewhat fantastic, when some of the evidence is provably false, then I have a large measure of reason for skepticism.
Right.
And I so found it in this paper.
Very good. All right. Now let's skip that one, and may I give you the next one?
Let's not skip it, but let's just keep it there.
We'll keep it there.
Please, on a different line, Ivan. That is, these Peary maps obviously raise questions that are of really sensational importance from the point of view of geology and anthropology and everything else. Do you know whether the existence and the nature and the deductions from the maps have been either publicized or attacked in any of the scholarly scientific journals that should be interested in them? It seemed to me that they should have been talked about, in Scientific American, for instance, not technical journals.
Mallory's work is coming out on the maps. In the meantime, it's been going on for several years, and there was most furious discussion went on in various quarters down there. As a matter of fact, again, I say I would like this program for you with Captain Mallory, because I'm simply, that is why I'm not presenting his theories for him. I'm simply stating what he has put in print so far, and what I have got from this other published source, and what he told me that night. But I know there's been a tremendous amount of discussion, and he can go all into it and give you all the references back and forth on both sides. There's been a lot, but they're going to wait to pop on him as soon as his book is out.
There is only one slide about the Perry Reese maps, as puzzling, as astounding as they seem to me, is that there was one point in which I would side with Lester, which I think was the strongest point for skepticism, which I think, Lester, you should have brought up, is that in finding this, in devising or finding what grid system apparently the ancient mapmakers used, they were perforce they had to work backwards. Now, Ivan, I think you'll agree that working backwards you can find anything.
That I interjected in my conversation. He never told me that, Mallory. I'm sorry, that's my mistake. Perhaps I shouldn't have said that. Maybe they didn't. But I was given to understand by him, because I kept on questioning him, well, how did you find out?
Because
he went on,
yeah.
He said they worked a very long time until they found one, and I imagine it was, he said, or if this was there and this was there, but it really is there and there, do you see, take 3 points or something, then and there was a grid, what would it look like? That's, as far as the best of my ability, how he tried to explain it to me.
Well, the thing that raises...
I don't want to mislead anybody.
Yeah, the thing that raises itself in my mind is that if... perchance, again, by this method of working backwards, it's quite possible that if I wanted to devise a system, assuming the ancient mapmakers used this system, if I devised a grid working backwards, I could also probably get very close approximations to the mountains of the moon, and therefore come upon the speculation that perhaps these ancient maps were really...
From that number of points on the map...
Astronomical charts.
I wish I'd brought the maps with me, because they're enormously...
Working backwards can be dangerous.
It can be very dangerous indeed. Well, but look, don't hold that against Mallory, because
I'm just saying
that in my conversation.
I'm not saying he did it deliberately.
No.
This is where, he had to, but this is still, it leaves a very open area.
I should imagine, that was my thought, that they probably did have to work backwards from what he told me, because he said, after all, they were there, and they were all, I use the word wacky, which is purely an editorial phrase, but what he used, he said they were all out of kilter. Then it dawned upon us that they were all equally out of kilter. In other words, there was a mathematical connection between the amount they were out. They were in the right order next door to each other and about the right size, but they were stretched in some such way. And it was a question of, I suppose it's easy enough if you have got the world as it really is, and the world as it's depicted here. Once you had the thought that there might have been a grid used, I should imagine that it almost amounts to working backwards, doesn't it? Try and squeeze the one you've got in the ancient map to fit the map as it is today on one of our recognized systems. I think...
Still remember the effort made to fit the Piltdown Man into the scale of evolution.
Yes,
and there was as much reason to accept that at one time, certainly, as there is to accept the Piri-Reis map, without the fact that there was a statement in it which could not be backed up.
Piltdown Man
very,
was
very
always
careful.
very
The
suspect.
Piltdown was always very suspect, and I maintain that
Very
on the
careful.
evidence standing before me now, this is very suspect.
No, there's
Well,
quite,
I don't
quite a
think
bit
you
of
have a
difference.
right, Lester, just because there's one thing wrong to disregard all the other things.
Wait
Now, I'm
a
very
minute,
much
Isabel. I'm
impressed.
going-
Wait a minute. I'm very much impressed by this these Antarctic explorations of the under the ice by using explosions and measuring the speed of the sound from them. If the shoreline of the buried shoreline turns out to be the same as under in these maps, I'm struck by that.
Wait a
I
second.
don't say that I understand it. I don't say about it, but I don't think you can ignore all of the other facts just simply because one fact doesn't fit with
Wait
the
a second,
knowledge.
Isabel. In the first place, provided the original maps show a correlation with the Arctic ice, the land under the Arctic ice, Antarctic ice, provided that is so, and provided it can be demonstrated, and is successfully demonstrated, then there is some reason to look at this. At the present time, I have not seen adequate evidence to accept this. I have seen no more evidence than I could have provided for the reality of Piltdown Man.
You're on very, very skating on very thin ice.
So are a great
Man.
many scientists who accepted Piltdown Man.
He was always suspected.
By many, but there were very many articles in learned journals which accepted Piltdown Man.
That's
The
because-
fact that
that's because-
Dan, please, let me finish. The fact that something appears in a learned journal or over a quasi-learned radio station, if such exists, does not establish irrefutable proof of anything. On the other hand, when the same man comes up with something which is utterly preposterous, offering a learned group, or at least a recognized testing group, as is evidence on that, then I certainly have no compulsion to accept any of it. I have every right to regard the entire thing with suspicion until it is proved otherwise.
Do you still suspect the cranium of the Piltdown Man?
I always did. I was one of those who did not accept the Piltdown
Well, I'm
Man.
afraid your entire argument
Now,
collapses
wait a second.
then.
Wait
Your
a second.
philosophy collapses.
I said I
said the cranium.
suspected- Oh, the cranium. The reality of the cranium?
Yeah.
That, I believe, has been established by now.
It establishes an
The
exceedingly
jawbone had no relationship to the
The
cranium.
jawbone was a fake and was a chimpanzee's jawbone. So I may say that some of the leading scientists said at the time that with a very little change it would become purely human. So that's beside the point. But what has been overlooked in this tassel at the British Museum is this, and I have a letter to this effect from none other than Professor W.C. Osman Hill, right in my briefcase. I'll look it out for you, in which I had asked him this very question. Oh, yes, everybody is happy now Piltdown Man has been gotten rid of. He was an awful nuisance on the family tree of human life at all times. Thank goodness he's gone, it's done, it was a fake. Old Dawson did it. But they've all overlooked the cranium. Now, they have now gone to work on the cranium, and they've found that it is just exactly as old as Dawson said the combined cranium and mandible was.
This does not surprise me at all, but the fantastic nature of Piltdown Man has been disposed of.
It was always pointed out by Elliot Smith, that if you read The Antiquity of Man or any of the standard textbooks on human physical anthropology and the origin of man, you'll find that Piltdown Man was always out on a limb. And the better men, Elliot Smith and
eventually.
Smith Woodward, and all of them, Arthur Keith,
Yeah.
he did a tremendous amount of work on it, but he always said it doesn't fit. The jaw does not fit to the skull. They look as if they do physically.
Yeah, Kroeber never accepted it at all. And in
A
class,
number didn't, Ben. but
Kroeber in class would say it was a forgery.
the point remains that men of good reputation, men who had reason to know, did accept it. You can
For
always
this
find...
reason, and this is the
Ben,
reason I
please.
would like to point out.
Please, may I finish? The reason that I bring this up is very simple. You cannot prove on limited authority anything. And when limited authority is used to back up a complicated and fantastic situation, which may or may not be true, I do not say. And when that authority is also used to back up something which is not true, the whole must be regarded with considerable skepticism until the parts can be sorted out and evaluated.
All right, now the point about the Piltdown Man is that the reason why first of all, there was a great deal of disagreement about it for many years. It was never fully accepted by a great many outstanding archaeologists and anthropologists. Now, exactly the Piltdown Man is that the reason why you find such disagreement, I think, and I don't think this will be disputed by anthropologists, because the discovery of the ancient and early home of mankind is one of the emotionally laden subjects in anthropology there is. Now, a good many countries would love very much to claim as the birthplace of man to be in such and such a place. This is something that is not emotionally neutral. And in fact, when it came out apparently that in England, at the time when on the continent of Europe, men were walking around that you couldn't quite distinguish between animals and apes and all the rest of it. In England, you had this fantastically highly evolved human being with a almost completely human cranium and an ape-like jaw. This is something that English anthropologists delighted in. I mean, it was whoopee. Here is the ancient birthplace of man. Now, it seems that it's very strikingly, a situation in anthropology has come about is that the final arbiters as to prehistoric fossils of mankind has always been the American anthropologists, because it is quite impossible that America could ever have been one of the early dawn places or the birthplaces of mankind, because there are no old world monkeys. Now, it has been throughout the literature in American anthropology that the Piltdown Man was a unfortunate accident, or, I mean, if they came right out, they called it a hoax, because of the fact that the cranium and the jawbone were separate and were in unsealed strata. It was in broken strata. And there were all sorts of implications that perhaps some early Englishman went over to the continent and got himself a jawbone of an ape and went back, and because maybe this was a weapon, it was buried with him. But the cranium has never been in doubt, because Dawson was a very good anthropologist, by the way.
Nobody questions it. Oh, well, yeah, they did for a while, but they shouldn't. Yeah.
No, he didn't. He was some status of sort of semi-amateur scientist, and it was a great deal. But a great many English anthropologists of high professional stature, and still do today. And you can still get into an argument in English anthropological circles about the authenticity of the Piltdown Man. Except there's one thing that no one has... The thing that's amazed me about the Piltdown hoax and its eventual discovery and exposure is that no one has ever mentioned anything about the Swanscombe Man.
Oh, Galley Hill.
No one has
been mentioned.
And look what? Because the Swanscombe Man was the identical situation with a human-like cranium and a simian-like jaw found in sealed strata. And Dawson had nothing to do with Swanscombe, and everyone has sort of shunted off, and now Swanscombe Man is becoming as much an annoyance as Piltdown Man.
And now they've dated the cranium of Piltdown Man and found that it is just as out of place as Dawson said it was, insofar that it by radiochemical methods, it is earlier even than Dawson suggested that the combined skull was. In other words, you've got as big a problem left now with the cranium of Piltdown Man, and a greater mystery than we ever had when it was partly a hoax. And that's what now the British Museum, they just got out, it's the selenium method, of infiltration, and the osmium method, I think, for the mineral content. And here is a real human cranium. They're extraordinarily thick and looking exactly like Galley Hill Man and Swanscombe, but it does have certain tendency to go towards what are called the Pithecanthropines. That's Pithecanthropus erectus, the famous ape man. It's without a jaw. Its teeth are all right. It's a modern man, but it's a way down below Neanderthals. That we begin to realize now that Neanderthal-type man evolved backwards. The most human-like were the earliest, and the least human-like were the latest. And may I just throw this into the pot? You know, they turned up a Neanderthal-type man in a western state of this union last year, don't you?
They did?
Yeah.
In a western state?
Yep. Yeah. In New Mexico, they have got up now a Neanderthal-type brain case. And may I just... It's no use. It is. And may I bring up one... Oh, that's all in print. And the Southwestern Museum has got it all. Maybe you remember his name, Stephen. But one word thing that you said, You never could have early man in this continent because we didn't have any old world monkeys. Let me pick you up on that. This is my
common ancestors.
No, but we did have the tarsiers, the original tarsiers.
But we never had the Dryopithecus.
We don't need it. Personally, I believe that Dryopithecus is nothing else but a type of superior baboon. We'll leave that out of it. No, but we did have the tarsiers, and it apparently goes tarsier, lemur one way, tarsier the other, from the tarsier to early proto-anthropoid, anthropoid off to the side, and then proto-humanoid, and then up to us. But maybe get back to this whole business of the little men, because I'm coming around to it. The point is this. These mountain ranges are on the maps. Some of these mountain ranges were not even known until 1952, I think it was, when Mr. Walters had the first surveys from the U.S. Army of these mountains in the Canadian Arctic Islands, and they were on the periodized maps. And nobody had suggested that they'd be mapped in the air until these four gentlemen were discussing it on their broadcast. And one said, well, somebody, I think the moderator, turned around to Reverend Linehan and said, well, how could it have been done in your opinion? He said, frankly, unless they had some kind of aerial device, he said, I don't see how on earth they could have got these maps. Now, my whole point is here. Mind you, I'm only a reporter in this, like in everything else. I'm gathering together all these statements which don't fit, and saying you put them all together in like a checkerboard, or you put together a puzzle, and there is one X factor in there all the way through. Everybody closes their minds and says nobody could have had tridimensional geometry and flying machines in 5,000 or 3,000 BC. Right. If there was a civilization on the surface of this earth that advanced, then they would have surely left some artifact that we could have found. Just supposing that the intelligences who did that job didn't come from this earth, but came from outside. And our primitive...
From another planet
going around another sun. They could come from the center of a sun, as far as I'm concerned, but from outside this planet. What makes it so amazing that we are the only intelligent animal in the universe, or creature in the universe? The Almighty, in His infinite wisdom, has surely seen fit to have some intelligence develop on other planets. All right, just supposing they did come. I didn't say they did, though I think there's quite a lot of possible evidence for that. They came here, primitive man, in the Stone Age, or even in ancient Egyptians, say dynasty number 10. They weren't very bright as technicians. These fellows may have come here and taught a few people how to use a pen and somebody to read a compass, maybe even shown them what a lens was. But if these visitors from outer space or inner space were coming here, they're not going to leave their artifacts lying around on the surface of the earth. They'd be very valuable in their ships. They wouldn't loan them to a lot of primitives, but they might have taught the primitives to do some of the hack work in the mapping and a bit of mining for them. And then when they pushed off, our ancestors, or the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians, may have retained a little bit of knowledge. Say, those people, they had some kind of, you went like that and you got fire, and it was so hot that, look, we got this wonderful new metal we can use. And all that would have gone into our mythology. Stefan and I have had long conversations on this, because when you dig back into all mythologies, you do find there's always this thing, we got it from somebody else.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the Niagara Cyclo Massage Unit, if it's possible that they had anything like that, back there.
It's possible.
I'll tell you what, because on Stefan Sanderson, editorial director of Fantastic Universe, Ben Iskowitz, the cybernetician, Ivan Sanderson, noted zoologist, and we have Lester Del Rey with us this morning, the author of the book entitled Rockets Through Space, published by Winston. And we have some telegrams. Let me take just a moment to remind you that we do have a teleprinter in our studio. Pick up your phone in any community where you may be at the present time, and we do cover some 27 states during the early hours of the morning. And tell the Western Union operator that you'd like to send a message to Long John Wux, New York City. Wux is spelled W-U-X. Those are not the call letters of the station. That's a code word. And that must be a part of the address. And if you have a question, or if you disagree with some statement that has been made or possibly will be made during the balance of the discussion this morning, well, you can accomplish that by just sending the telegram to Long John Wux, New York City. Lester, do you want to read a couple of those telegrams that we've received already? Yeah, this one is from Philadelphia, signed by Rob Roy Hunt. Long John Wook. Someone asked me, what do you think of the anniversary of Russia's Sputnik? We should have put one up in the meantime. I said, worry about what we throw down. It is much more to the point and much more advanced. Incidentally, he's right. It is the anniversary of Russia. It was the anniversary of Russia's first Sputnik. Man's first entrance into space in October 4th, 1957.
That's right.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, dear Sputnik, wherever you lie in ashes today.
He blooped, didn't he?
Yeah, he blew. Of course, I wonder how we're going to throw something down until we put something up, but then I won't comment on that one. Here's one from Wynwood, Pennsylvania. Please tell the Philadelphia Float Ben that I hope we shall very soon again hear the superb Ben Isquith, spelled right, too, of the Jurgen discussion of May 31st, 1958. Signed, Marion Clark.
Thank you very much. Very nice telegram.
Thought you'd agree with it. Yeah, Garrison, New York. Among the elements are any equal? If not, why expect it of man? Tell me anything that is equal to something else. This is signed by M. Belcher.
What's that?
I don't quite understand it myself. Among the elements are any equal?
Probably means that
Certainly not in weight, in atomic weight, but I don't know how else you would figure it. Interesting, anyway.
I guess the idea of the telegram is that if the elements are unequal, why should you expect forms of life such as mankind to be equal to any other kind?
Yeah. And here's one from Brooklyn, Long John. How many cases of the creatures are recorded? How many persons have seen them? This is signed by Sidney Isaacs.
Well, I think that Isabelle Davis will comment on that after a brief period of time, because we want to continue the discussion in the line that it has been going. Here's one other telegram. Evidently, this man, that's Howard Menger.
No,
Evidently, he doesn't agree with some statement that's been made. Let's find out. Read it first, please.
This is from Howard Menger of Lebanon, New Jersey. It says, Long John. Scientists of 150 years ago considered the platypus of eastern Australia and Tasmania to be a hoax. Skepticism has not changed any about other so-called mysteries of today. Tell Ivan there are little men, and we have photographed life forms.
Photographed life forms. Well, first of all, let's clear away the first part. Howard is quite right on the subject of the platypus having been disallowed for many years. First of all, they thought that it was the things that sailors used to make. They used to get the front end of a monkey and stitch it onto a fish and sell it in the seaports in Europe as a juvenile mermaid. Some of them were so beautifully made that you really couldn't tell where the fish began and the monkey ended. And they did, when they first saw the platypus, they said, oh, rubbish. I mean, somebody's just taken a steamroller and run over a groundhog or something and then put a beaver's tail on it and a few other things. But this other business I don't get at all. Tell Ivan there are little men, and we have photographed life forms.
I photographed life forms the other day. I took a picture of people.
Exactly. Where's that sign of mine? Help me get rid of people.
Stamp out people.
Well, here's Howard. I've known Howard for many years. I'd like him to explain himself. Of course, he's photographed life forms. He can go out and photograph a bug in the backyard. That's a life form.
He means extraterrestrial life.
I fancy so. But where is photographs of little men if he's got them? Certainly like to see them.
Yes, I've never heard of any photographs.
They don't register.
Nor have I.
Well, there's a possibility that...
Well, Howard is always making statements like this, dear boy, if you're listening. We've known each other for a number of years. You're always saying that you've got these photographs and this, that, and the other. Where are they? Why can't we see them? And I'd like very much to see a photograph of a little small-type humanoid. I'd like to see a clear photograph of one of these human-type space people. I have yet to see one. I've seen a silhouette.
In the Ellingham book, you remember, there was a photograph of a shadow, which was supposed to be a humanoid extraterrestrial from Mars.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Just the back view.
Yeah, just the back view. But that's the only picture that I can recall. If you accept our aura rings, of course.
Well, there's that little creature that's in some museum in Colorado.
Oh, yes, yes.
You know,
yes, I know.
in Kenneth Arnold's pamphlet.
I've seen that creature.
You've seen that
Yeah.
creature? But this is a little, quote, man, unquote. I don't know what it is. What do you
That
think it
creature
is,
was shown to
Ivan?
me by Ted Kazimierov, who is now the official historian of the Bronx. He's also a very wonderful, wonderful person, and he teaches dental surgery on kids, what's it called. He had this thing. It was brought to him by one of these crackpots, and
Are you sure this is the same one that's out in Colorado?
Yeah,
Or
it
is
was
it a
brought
different
from
one?
Colorado. It was alleged to have been found in a cave in conjunction
Yeah.
with some peculiar bits and pieces of something. It is a perfectly normal, not normal, abnormal, well-known abnormality. It's the most peculiar thing biologically. Apparently, human beings and animals can age in the womb before they're ever born. They come out 80 years old. Most astonishing. And this was a case of one particular type of deformity, which has a very flattened type top of the skull, and also has gone through this, I wish I could remember the word, it's a sort of speeded up geriatrics, you know, the whole life history has gone through. Sometimes we get little tiny old men who are only a year old, you see, and this was probably stillborn and was of that nature. And he said, these people brought it to him and said, at last we've got a space creature. And he took one look at it and was able to say immediately what it was, and he showed it to me at that time. It's sort of mummified. I fancy that's the same one. But these people, I don't know, they're always coming up and saying, we've got this and we've got that. Where are they? Mind you, I'd be on your side of the fence, Lester, if I saw the photographs, because I'm not a photographer, but I have shown certain photographs that have been shown to me not of space people, but of big game hunting in Africa. And Bob Duncan, who's one of my partners, he is a brilliant professional amateur professional photographer. He said to me one day, he said, look, I'm not going to publish these photographs. Why? He gave me two photographs of a man standing in the foreground holding a rifle and a very dangerous beast charging him. And in one photograph, it was a sequence of photographs. And you could see the beast away in a very far distance, and then you could see it closer, and then you could see it very close up. But he took a lens. It's a funny shaped lens he has. It's sort of oblate, and he said, just take a look at the clothing of the gallant sportsman, and you will see that every crease, even the flies sitting on his pristine white shirt, were in identical positions when the animal was at all different distances. And he said, I will not publish the one where the rifle is practically sticking down the nose of said beast, because it's the same beast which you can just see in the distance in one photograph, and the man is standing in exactly the same position. So they've simply done a nice dubbing job, one on top of the other.
Well, hasn't this been proven to have been done on some of the contact photographs, too?
They aren't that good, even.
It has been proven.
Have you seen the sets that were sold at the spacecraft convention?
I was at the convention, but I didn't have time to see the set. I
You
would
haven't
assume
seen
that
the
they are
set?
the same ones.
They're extremely interesting.
Aren't they the same pictures that we've always seen?
No, there are some new ones. And very, if there's photographs of little men, as this is what he's talking about, or of life forms, are no more convincing than that set, which was sold, I believe, for $8 a set.
According to the newspapers, you're wrong, Isabel. They have a special convention price of $5.
That is right, but the literature listed is $8 if you order them by mail.
I know.
They are really a fantastic set of things.
Do these include the photograph in Marla Baxter's My Saturnian Lover?
No, they are different.
Because I was interested in those pictures of 250. The book is called 250, doesn't it?
72 pages, $2 and a half.
I was interested.
You know, you're going to have trouble even if you do get a photograph.
No, but really, there was one photograph in particular there which I thought
in
Marla's book, which I thought was quite interesting, and which I really would have liked to have seen the original of. Incidentally, do you remember?
Which one is that? The one the man disappears, he doesn't show on the film?
No, I'm thinking one of the spacecraft landing, which showed rather a Saturnian craft, which reminded me of a few other photographs I've seen. But do you remember, Ivan, on one occasion when we had one of these discussions, when I told Howard, and I repeated on the air again, that any time he expects a landing, or anytime anything is going to happen, I would be delighted, and I know I think I can speak for you too.
Certainly what I'm saying.
We would both be delighted to be there.
And see the thing. Of course, we're going to have trouble with photography because you know there are some mirages which can be photographed and some which can't.
Yeah.
And
Still.
so I don't think a photograph would be even would be evidence in itself.
Still, I would be delighted to be present at any such happening. Of course, it might end up with Lester expressing his doubts about me just as he expresses his doubts about the complete, shall we say, doubts about the possible gullibility of Father Lenehan. But still, I mean, I would be willing to take my chances on that.
So would I.
Well, I don't think either of you gentlemen would approach the occasion in the proper frame of mind, and therefore I doubt that you will be invited.
Well, but you see, Isabel, I have in my day, in my younger, less unregenerate science fiction whatnot days, I've studied the philosophies, I've had some familiarity with the higher things, and so I undoubtedly would approach it with the proper spirit.
Well, may I make this suggestion? We have devoted a tremendous amount of time to the spacecraft convention, to the Mengers, the Van Tassels, the George Hunt Williamson, etc. I think we could get back to our discussion of the morning because we're certainly very, very, at least I am, interested in learning more about Isabelle Davis's theories and Ivan Sanderson's theories rather than discussing the Menger thing that I think if Menger ever decides not to talk, I could fill in for him because I know it backwards and forwards. Let's pick it up from there.
John, I'm glad you make that clear distinction, and I would like to make it again between what we use, for lack of a better word, ufology and ufologists, and what are commonly called nowadays contactors or sorcerians or sorcerers, I like to call them myself. There is an absolute distinction. They make certain claims. We do not feel that they have brought forward any evidence. We do not make any particular claims. I think we're just probing and asking questions. We are highly skeptical. You certainly won't find a more skeptical person in the world than Lex Mather.
That I'll buy.
It's perfectly true. I am not so skeptical because I've had a couple of shocks in my life. Things in my own field that just didn't fit in, and yet there they were, and you've got to do something about it. And I do think that telegram, which you read, a very brief one, saying how many times have these little men been seen or something, that's a very good point. We sit up here and we talk. And all of your 9 listeners, John, are fascinated, but we cannot, for Lester or anybody, you cannot bring all the evidence up here. You'd have to be like Leon Davidson and bring suitcases full of stuff. But I do think that we could give your listeners some actual facts. Isabel's the person. She translated this book. Here is a book which is on a quite different subject, really, orthoteny, he calls it, or orthoteny, straight line theory. That's one thing. But in the book, how many are, Isabel?
I think, may I take a moment, too, to remind our listeners that we are discussing a book that was translated by Lex Mather and Isabelle Davis. It's entitled Flying Saucers and the Straight Line Mystery. The author is Aimé Michel, published by Criterion, and it's available in your bookstores. And it's a book that I think anybody who may have some interest in flying saucers, I think that it's must reading. I think it's a great book and something that you'll enjoy reading, and it'll possibly give you some food for thought.
There are 3 particularly interesting facets about the book, John, and one is, of course, his orthotenic theory, the theory of orthotenic lines, which he observed in the sightings in France in the enormous flap there in the fall of 1954. In this country, we are accustomed to thinking of 1952 as the big year for saucers because that was when the largest number of sightings occurred here. Tremendous peak. But actually, the European wave in the fall of 1954 is probably even greater. And he analyzes these sightings and discovered for a period, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks, that he found these patterns as straight lines. They were not lines along which each of the objects traveled, but they were more like a railway map routes, which were used by several different objects in the course of each day, and the routes changed about midnight, according to his plotting of them. Now, that is the first and the most interesting theory, because it can be tested in future flaps if we have sufficient data, if we know the place and the exact time of sightings. It can be tested. In fact, we tried to test it for the November 1957 flap in the United States, which is the most recent one, first week in November last year, and we did not discover these orthotenic lines in that group of sightings. Now, whether this is for technical reasons, whether they weren't being used, whether there was no such pattern applying or not, we just don't know. We found what Mr. Nebel called pseudo-orthotenic lines. That is, if you put down enough of these sightings, you can join a certain number of them, of the points, with a straight line. But if anyone wants to compare the maps for the United States last fall with some of the maps from France, they will see that the type of pattern is quite different. I saw you studying them, Ben, and don't you agree that the overall appearance of that United States map is quite different from the one, for example, for October 7th and 11th in France? The general effect is the same. Now, I can testify that those lines exist in France because I spent about 4 weeks with my living room rug, two large maps of France pinned down on it. We had to detour around it all the time, and my very sweet little old cleaning woman was quite distressed because she couldn't vacuum the rug for about 3 weeks where the map of France was. And we put in the pins in the proper place, and we put threads and strings to show them, and I can assure you that those lines do exist as they're drawn in France. We didn't find them in the United States. Now, that's the first interesting thing about the book, and the second interesting thing is Mr. Mevin's appendix describing the flap last November, which had a number of very, very interesting cases. We couldn't treat all of them in detail, but there are some very unusual ones, including one which we consider very authentic, of a radio signal emitted by a UFO up in Lake Bascatong, on the shore of Lake Bascatong in Canada. Mr. Nebel himself interviewed the witnesses in that case, and he regards the account as perfectly authentic and reliable.
Can you tell us something about the interview?
About the account?
Yes.
These hunters were up there in the... They just been a hunting party. I think it was 4 people. I'll have to look at it in the book to make sure that I have the details correctly. And they had their radio on, and
these hunters.
Yes, that's right. And one man went out. I guess he went out to get a drink of water or something. Came back in and said, "I saw flying saucers." There's one hovering over the woods.
They were not tenting out. They had a cabin.
They had a cabin. That is right.
And they had a radio in this cabin.
That is
they had
right.
to listen to the radio.
That is right. Mm-hmm. That is right. And he said, "Look, there it is. It's over that hill." And there was this thing with a very broad beam of light coming down, and another one going up, so that the clouds above the object were illuminated by the beam going upwards. It was a very broad beam. It wasn't a narrow one. And the trees below, the trees on the hill, were illuminated by the descending beam. And it was perfectly motionless. And about this time, they noticed that they weren't getting the radio program that they should. And
was there static?
Yes, there's static.
Or was the program, was the radio conked out?
This is what I want to look up and make sure whether they were getting an interference signal or whether it was completely blanked out. I didn't talk to this.
I can take up there. They had 2 radio systems, and one of which they always got a government time signal on, which goes always. And they went absolutely blank, both of them, didn't they, except for a...
No, excuse me, it was a battery-powered radio because there was no electricity at the camp, and there was no reception on the radio, that's it. Oh, excuse me, Ivan, there was another radio, a portable shortwave, which was also found to be useless.
I thought so.
And not even the government time signal could be picked up, yes. But at one shortwave frequency, a
Isabel,
very strong
I'm very sorry.
signal was
May I interrupt
received.
you? Everybody wants to hear this,
I'm not
and
talking close enough.
you're sort of going off mic.
I'm sorry. Now, I'll pop it up in front of me so that I can
All right,
make sure of
fine,
these
please.
details. They did have a battery-powered radio and another radio, portable shortwave, and both of them went out, except that at one shortwave frequency, a very strong signal was received, described as a rapidly modulated single tone, somewhat like Morse code in effect, but it was not Morse, which would have been recognized immediately because there were two of the hunters were radio hams. It was so strong that it seemed to have blocked up the receiver, and the statement is made that this effect is well known to those who live near radio transmitting stations, and probably is well known to you, Lord John. There was about 15 minutes of this, and then the object began to rise and move slowly off to the south, went into the clouds. The radios were tried then, and then they worked after the object had gone into the clouds.
Mm-hmm.
The four hunters, shaken by the obvious unearthliness of what they had just seen, bolted the cabin door and loaded all their guns before going to bed. This is fairly frequent, this gun loading and wanting to arm oneself against these things. In one of the cases in Michelle, possibly the first encounter with an alleged saucer occupant in Europe in the fall of 54, the farmer was carrying home a pitchfork. And after this thing was over, he said he regretted very much that he hadn't used the pitchfork to force the creature to accompany him, or else to kill him to have him for a specimen.
Well, why don't we get back for a moment to this, to the four hunters in Canada? Did they see anybody, any occupant in the
No, they
van?
did not. This object
Nothing at
was
all.
strictly airborne. It did not land, and they saw no occupant even inside without its landing, which has happened on some occasions.
What leads you to believe, Isabel, or Lex Mather, that this unusual craft was from another planet?
Are you suggesting the alternate explanation that it might be one of ours?
Well, I'm really not. I'm just
terrestrial
thinking
one.
at the moment. I mean, I know nothing about the story. I've read it too, but I know that our listeners possibly have the same thought in mind. I remember, I don't know, maybe it was 4 or 5 months ago, that something like this happened in Texas.
Yes.
Where in fact, I spoke in Illinois. I spoke to a chief of police out there, or rather, a lieutenant of the Illinois State Police, on the beeper phone, and he told me that their equipment in the radio car conked out on them. They saw a bright flash of light, and he described this in detail. Now, I was just wondering, isn't it possible that this craft could be something that has been manufactured on this planet?
Yes, in this case it could, because the movement of the object was slow. It was a hovering object, and I suppose you could say that there was there's a possibility there was some kind of an engine there that was holding it up. Binoculars, which they used on it, showed no detail. It was just, let me say, it was just spherical. And there's nothing they could identify it with that had been seen. No known terrestrially manufactured object that they were aware of that it could have been or would have been with these two beams of light going up and down. But it is a possibility in this case because you do not have the violent maneuvers which are such a marked feature of the ones that do definitely seem to be extraterrestrial, simply because there's no way of figuring out how any airplane or jet that we have could possibly move the way some
Why are you so interested in this particular story when there's no evidence of even little men? I mean, there's nothing really fabulous about this story, but I think, I may be wrong, I think you've implied, Isabel, that this is possibly proof that something is happening that's rather unusual.
Well, I think it was unusual, don't you, John?
Not necessarily.
It isn't. Of course, if I say no, immediately your question would be, well, when was the last time that you saw something like this? And I must admit that I have never had an experience similar to this.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard of a number of these situations. I've been told that they've occurred. Of course, on this program, I've been told so many things that it's pretty difficult to know what's what.
Well, you're quite right, of course. There are a number of other cases of interference with radio and TV and automobile engines.
Right.
It's very interesting that the French cases, you don't have any radio interference, but you have some of what Michel calls the hallucinated machines, because he says maybe perhaps human beings can have hallucinations, or what happens to automobile motors and headlights and so on. You don't have any car radios, because I guess you didn't have so many in France of those. Well, I'm particularly interested in that case, not because it's the only one of its kind by any means, but simply because we happened to investigate this one, and we were, Mr. Nebel.
Well, what is your conclusion?
My conclusion is that this was an unidentified flying object. All right.
So you go ahead, continue.
Yes, an unidentified flying object, probably of extraterrestrial origin.
But why extraterrestrial? These phenomena, so far as I can find, could be explained fairly logically terrestrially. A strong signal of any kind will blanket out a radio which has an AVC circuit in it to cut down the volume of other signals coming in. And as a matter of fact, all they have to have is a defective, I don't know what the motor was, I don't pretend to, but if they have a defective spark coil or something like that, that is perfectly capable of putting out a tremendous signal for a short distance that will blanket out everything. And still give that
a radio?
Yes, there's an AVC, an automatic volume control circuit in a radio, which means that when a strong signal comes in, there's a feedback cutting down the sensitivity of the radio. That can reduce the sensitivity until only the very strongest signal can come in.
Well and good, Lester, but what was the object?
Since there isn't enough information there, I can't tell.
Well, the information, a brilliantly luminous yellowish white sphere, considerably smaller than the moon and as dazzling to the eye as a gas mantle, hanging a few hundred feet over the summit of a hill 2 or 3 miles away.
Was this in the daylight?
Binoculars revealed no detail.
Was this
No,
in the
this
daylight?
is 9 p.m.
9 p.m.
Only thing that I'm enthused about is the fact that I have a tremendous amount of respect for Nebel, and I don't think that the guy goes off half-cocked. I think when he goes out there to investigate something, I think he does a thorough job of it.
But he automatically connects this radio signal with an object seen in the sky, which is not necessarily the case at all.
Well, you have 2 coincidences, and that is the appearance of the object and the blacking out of the radio, and the moving away of the object and the return of radio reception on both radios. There is some connection, or at least it isn't illogical to suppose there's some connection.
Ivan, what does this sound like to you? Are you impressed with this particular sighting, this Canadian story?
Not particularly. I'm particularly interested in the fact that in connection with an object which doesn't look like anything, that they weren't just hunters, particularly the present one. I have nothing against hunters, but there are people of pretty high standing who were out on a hunting trip.
Mm-hmm.
And they had not seen anything or did not know of anything like this object in the sky, and coincident with it, there was radio blackout, if not actual radio signals. I just think it's interesting that any, let's call them UFOs, can do such a thing, whether they come from this Earth or from another Earth, or whether they're life forms or various different things. It could be, as I keep on saying, they could be all of these things at the same time. One may be one kind and one may be another. But I am interested because here is a case which is as good as we can get, that something, well, at least it is in some way connected, in my opinion, with radio interference, let's put it that way. That was a new one. We've had the number of cases of car engines stalling and the lights going out and the radio going off in motor cars, both in France, in Italy, and in Texas, Levelland and all that stuff. And after all, that was the chief of police who went out in Levelland, Texas, after some people had reported these facts. He said, "Oh, nonsense, what's going on?" He went out and he rode around, and it happened to him, too. And a great number of cases in this M.A. Michel book here are from police blotters. And it's no with people sitting around and saying this is all nonsense. There cannot be
Does
this
that
number
impress
of...
you, the fact that it's in the police record?
Very much. I
It
think
really
the police... Yeah, I'm very much impressed with the police in practically every country I've been in.
I'm impressed with the police, too, but the fact that they have something in their books about an incident that allegedly occurred doesn't mean a thing, because if I go to the police department now and I tell them that I was walking down West 48th Street near the Hudson River and I saw two little green men, I think they would put it on their books.
Well, then...
They may laugh about it, too, but I think they will record it.
I use the word police blotter in the exact American sense. I don't mean that. What I mean is something quite different, John. That quite a number of the people who have given it as their opinion in here that the persons who said they saw things were not lying, but that they were serious-minded citizens, when whole villages said they'd seen the same thing at only a few feet distance, himself had been there, a junior policeman, and his superior says, well, I think there must have been such a thing taking place because the police, after all, are trained to be a little bit more observant than other people. They're much better apt to be able to discover a lie than just the ordinary person, and it's part of their training.
Well, we're not talking about ordinary things right now, Ivan.
Well, but
you honestly think that policemen are trained to investigate little men?
I think they are trained definitely to investigate and to evaluate the various statements of various different people about an object. You know the old story about 400 people seeing an accident and having 400 different stories. Well, it's the poetry police who have to go through all those stories and try and find out what, as far as possible, what did happen. And I'd much rather have a policeman's evaluation, especially a working country policeman's evaluation of what the people say they saw in his village, than I would take anybody from anywhere else. I think the police on the whole tend to be more reliable and know more about it, I believe. Therefore, if I see that a road patrol officer says that he saw so-and-so, I'd better pick up my ears and say, oh, my golly, I mean, he of course, a person in the police force is as likely to be in the statement as anybody else. But when he's one in a group, I'll go and get his evaluation first.
This is WOR Radio, your station in New York, 710 on the dial, and a message now about no-dos. I'm Stephen Sanderson, editorial director of Fantastic Universe, and Lester Del Rey, author of the book entitled Rockets Through Space, published by Winston. If I may take just another moment, we are talking about a book this morning. Isabelle Davis and Lex Mather. Lex is in Europe at the present time, so he was not able to join us this morning. But Isabelle Davis and Lex Mather translated this book written by Aimee Michel. The title of it is Flying Saucers and the Straight Line Mystery. The publisher, Criterion, available in your bookstores. I have read the book, Amy, almost all of it, but I know you've worked on it, and you certainly know a lot more about it than I do by just going through it once. I was wondering if you know offhand how many different stories are in the book about the little green men and about these unusual sightings.
Yes, I do. I counted them up, and the European cases come to 25. That includes one that occurred in France in 1957. All the others are in 1954. One of them is a mention of one that occurred in Germany, but most of the ones that he deals with are French cases. And some of them are extremely interesting. One of the most interesting occurred at a place called Chabet. That's in the department of Drôme, and that's near Lyon and Valence in the southeast of France. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Monsieur and Madame Lebeuf who lived in Valence, had gone to visit her in-laws, her parents rather, in this little town of Chabet. She was out in the afternoon picking mushrooms, and her husband was a few hundred yards away, and there were some other people around. And her dog began to bark. As usual, there are 3 of these 25 cases in which the dog gave the warning of that something odd was happening. And she looked over toward a wheat field, and she saw there what she thought was first was a small scarecrow. And then as she walked closer to it, and the dog continued to bark and howl, and the other dogs in the village joined in the howling, she suddenly realized that this was not a scarecrow. It was coming towards her with a kind of a waddling or swaying gait, and it was like something done up in she described it as a translucent diving suit. And as it got closer, she saw the face behind the mask or helmet or whatever it was what she thought were two very large eyes. And she suddenly realized that she was looking at something that was a little bit out of the ordinary, and she gave a scream of terror and dived into some bushes to hide from this thing. Her husband heard her and came up, and some other people came up also. And the little creature then made its way to a circular, flat, metallic object that was resting some distance away in the wheat field, got in, and the object took off at a very low angle from the ground and went off into the distance very rapidly. And when they went to examine the ground, they found that the wheat was mashed down in a circle about the size of the object, and also that there are some acacia trees there where one or two of the branches had been broken off as the object traveled up in its as it left. And also, because it left the ground at such a low angle, some of the wheat was mashed down. And Mrs. Madame Leboeuf was in bed for several days, and I think
afterwards.
Yes, afterwards from the shock. That's right. And it seems to me that the dog was still scared to death 3 days later. Other people had heard the dogs howling, and several other people it doesn't say the exact number, had seen the thing take off. And this was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This is unusual because all but I think about 3 or 4 of these cases occurred at night or at dusk or at dawn.
Was there any peculiar odor?
No, there was no odor
like
in this
West
one.
Virginia monster that Ivan...
No, there was no gas in this case, and no odor. If there was any odor in the vegetation as a result of the thing being there, it is not mentioned and probably would have been. It did take off with a sharp whistling or sizzling noise, which is also unusual because not by no means all of these things are silent, but a good many of them are. And this is a very well authenticated case. It was very widely publicized in press at the time. It was one of the most famous ones. It's as famous as the Flatbush
Monster. Does that impress
Monster.
you, the fact that the thing has been publicized a lot?
No.
Because Howard Avenger's been publicized.
You're quite
a lot
right.
on press.
It's an excellent point. And no, I shouldn't say that. I should simply say that it was a well-known case. It was better known than some of the others that he prints. It was a cause célèbre.
Isabelle, I know everybody sitting around here no doubt has dozens of questions, but it's my good fortune to be the moderator, so I can be greedy and take up a couple of minutes. You mentioned about 25 cases in Europe.
25 cases in this book that he describes or mentions in detail. Now, this does not include the cases that we mention in our appendix in this.
How many additional cases do you have in the appendix?
Well, we have about five or six, I think.
In the States here?
In the States here, yes. Yes. Oh, yes. These are, I'm referring to cases reported little men and humanoids in the November flap. That's what the appendix covers, is the last November wave of sightings and reports. Now, we don't accept all of these. There are several of them that are of the contact type, and we're very dubious about them. But I was referring to the French cases described by Michel. Now, of course, this is by no means all of them. There must be probably at least 100. It's a little hard to count them because sometimes you'll have an author says there were several other cases, but he doesn't say exactly how many in a given period of time. But we certainly have 100 at least.
I wonder if you could tell us something about the author, Amy Michel. The background.
He is an engineer.
What kind of engineer?
I believe he's an acoustical engineer. He has made quite a study of this. As you know, he had another book out, The Truth About Flying Saucers, published 2 or 3 years ago. And he has been in quite close contact with a number of astronomers and so on. He's a technical man, not a theoretical scientist. It's quite
Are there
clear.
a number of French scientists and astronomers who believe in flying saucers?
There certainly are. I don't know all of their names, but some of them have taken
Would you say
quite a
this is
keen
more
interest.
prevalent in France than what it is in the States?
Somewhat
as far
more
as
so.
scientists
Somewhat
and
more so. Yes,
astronomers?
I believe that they are a little more willing to come out and express their interest publicly in France. I would get this impression from the book.
Is this possibly why we have 25 European cases in the book?
Because the
Because
scientists
there's more
are more.
believers there?
No, I think one reason is because France is a smaller country, perhaps, or perhaps there
Does
are
that
more
mean we should
landings
have more
there.
because it's a smaller country? Do you think this would be conducive to landings of saucers?
No, I think it would probably be conducive to learning about the cases.
Population.
Yes,
Population density is much greater.
much greater and much more evenly distributed than here. And looking at those maps of France, it just seems as if they have a village every mile and a half, and every village has been named, every stick and stone has been named, and they've all been lived in for hundreds and thousands of years. It's perfectly fascinating to study those maps. No, I don't mean that we should have more, but if they occur, I think there's more chance of somebody seeing them because